As you may have learned from my last video, Esao Andrews is one of my favorite artists. Several years ago, I did a master copy of one of his paintings. Master copies are as they sound, copies of artist artworks recreated with the intention of learning something about the way in which the artist created their artwork. I had a blast with this master copy. It was a real challenge, but I learned quite a bit. However, recently, I've been in a bit of a rut. I've made several paintings with the intention of showing them off here, but none of them have quite been satisfactory enough for me to want to show them. To get out of this rut, I went back to something that I was familiar with, doing master copies. I did a particularly small one, but nevertheless, it was very informative and helped me try out a simple yet effective technique to implement into my paintings. It was from this master copy that I developed a spark to create a painting that I was truly excited to share. Hello and welcome, my name is Jason, and today we're going to be creating this scene using Casein. Along the way, I'll share some of my process, some stories, and some fun facts. Alright, let's get to it. While this video isn't focused on the creation of the master copy, but rather the piece that developed from it, I still wanted to discuss it as a part of the creative process. Looking through Esao's social media and website for a painting to recreate, I stumbled across a cropping from his oil painting Pesta from 2016. In this post, he featured a few in-progress shots of the painting. This was perfect as it allowed me to follow along with the process, seeing the development in each stage. Although, I ran into some challenges. Esao uses solvents in his oil painting process, whereas I do not. A few years ago, after reading The New Oil Painting by Kimberly Brooks, I was convinced to eliminate solvents from my workflow due to concerns about the long-term health effects, especially since I paint at home where ventilation isn't always ideal. While this adds an extra layer of difficulty, it's a challenge I've accepted. However, knowing that Esao relies on solvents in his process, I had to come up with a plan to recreate the piece as accurately as possible without using them. While I might have learned more by following his exact workflow, I wanted to ensure that what I learned would still be applicable to my own painting style. Since he achieves his signature look through carefully calculated layers, something that's difficult to replicate without solvents for thinning paint, I decided to make a major pivot. Instead of struggling to mimic his process without thin layers, I switched to a medium I knew I could properly thin with. I chose Casein. Not only because it's a medium I've been working with a lot lately, but it's also a medium that can work very thinly, just like Esao does. With my medium chosen, I set out to copy the painting using the process shots as landmarks to follow. Overall, I had a really fun time with this master copy. It was a great challenge to recreate, and I think I did a fairly good job at matching the color and design. I wasn't able to get as neatly blended of a look as the original because of the limitations of Casein as a medium, but overall, I'm really pleased with the outcome. One key takeaway from this process was the realization that it's okay to use the white of the paper as highlights in certain areas. Building up thin layers allowed me to take advantage of the paint's transparency in the final piece. Since Casein and gouache are mostly opaque mediums, I had been treating them more like acrylic, fully covering the areas with a thick final coat. However, this experience helped me to see that, like watercolor, they can also be used in a way that lets the brightness of the paper shine through when working thinly. From this experience, I was excited to take what I had learned and apply it to a future painting. This is where the idea for this new piece came to life. It's been over a month since my last video, and in that time I've been exploring new topics and subjects to challenge myself a little more. Unfortunately, I became more critical of myself with these new subjects, leading me to feel unsatisfied. While designing a portfolio to show new clients and employers, I started to look back at my older work. It made me think about how, in trying new things, I strayed away from what I enjoyed most about my work, and the things that made me feel the most successful. To create a painting I'd be happy with, I needed to call upon my favorite subject, the butterfly. My motivation to create a new butterfly piece made me recall a conversation I had with the buyer of one of my paintings last year. One thing that stood out to me from our conversation was that she appreciated how my butterfly works were never just simple butterflies, but usually encompassed a twist or a story. I appreciated this comment because it was something that I'd always loved doing in my work, and I was glad to see that somebody appreciated it. Motivated by that conversation, I knew whatever butterfly I picked needed to be special. Looking through my usual sources for butterfly photography, I found a particularly interesting one, the striped albatross. I was not only interested by the name, but also by the look. While the males of this species are fairly plain looking, the females have a very interesting and speckled texture that looked really fun to paint. The subtle hints of yellow also stood out to me as little pops of color that could help to illuminate a rather desaturated scene. Recalling the conversation I had with the buyer had given me even more motivation to add something special to the scene. Testing some options, I stumbled across a neat idea. Out of the veins of the hind wings would be an assortment of little white flowers bringing to life an otherwise desolate landscape. I often start a project without a fully formed scene in my mind, experimenting with ideas before discovering the story that fits with the subject. For this piece in particular, it took some trial and error to find the right elements to give that extra little bit of flair. I usually begin by sketching the subject in my sketchbook while running through what-if scenarios in my head. What if there was a giant butterfly perched on a decaying tree in a wasteland? What if flowers were sprouting out of its wings? It seems simple, but coming up with original ideas can be one of the most agonizing parts of the painting process. Often I can't force ideas, I just have to let them come naturally, and when they do, they often appear out of nowhere, making it difficult to replicate the process for future paintings. While waiting for inspiration to strike, I tend to scroll through Pinterest or other art platforms. After a while, I finally had the idea in mind for this piece, and after making a digital mock-up, I was ready to start. Skipping ahead, at this stage in the painting, I was thinking a lot about what I had learned for the master copy. Using Casein for this painting as well, I was being careful and intentional about the layers I was using and how important it was to take my time to build them up slowly. Subtle color variations is also something that Esao does in his work, which I integrated into the tree, adding bits of warmer and cooler variations as well. In the process of creating the texture for this tree, I looked at a lot of photographs of tree bark, trying to emulate the rough texture. Additionally, I used thin layers of paint to soften and dull out the branches that were further away, giving the illusion that the tree has some three-dimensionality to it. Without doing this, it would make the tree appear flat and rather uninteresting. From here, I moved on to painting the butterfly, starting small with the body before moving on to the wings. As you may have guessed, butterflies are my favorite animals, but that wasn't always the case. While working at a local art studio, an artist friend challenged me to paint a moth while training in gouache. It was one of my first experiences with the medium, and capturing the intricate details of the wings proved to be quite a challenge. Despite the difficulty, I had a blast with this piece. It not only sparked my excitement for gouache, but also deepened my appreciation for these beautifully winged creatures. While I tend to prefer butterflies, I have to credit a moth for being the gateway to my fascination with Lepidoptera. These butterflies, found in South and Southeast Asia, are part of the Pieridae family, known for their distinct white, yellow, and orange colorations with black spots. Interestingly, the pigmentation in their wings are actually derived from waste production in the body. This same family of butterflies is actually where the term butterfly comes from. Within the family is the common brimstone, a pure yellow butterfly, which early naturalists called the butter-colored fly. Another interesting fact about butterflies is that they can actually taste with their feet. Many butterfly species, most notably the monarch, have very particular host plants or plants they lay eggs on. Having taste receptors on their feet allow butterflies to instantly know that it's the right plant the second they land on the surface. They also use their antennae to smell, allowing them to sense a plant from over a mile away. With both the butterfly and the flowers being white, I had to incorporate some contrast to allow the flowers to stand out against the white background of the butterfly wings. With this, I added the dark shadow around the flowers to help them stand out from the surface. I also darkened the lower half of the wings, showing that the surface is angled downwards away from the light. With Richeson Casein in particular, the lights appear to dry darker while the darks appear to dry lighter. This can often make it challenging to get those punchy highlights in a piece. To help get bright highlights, it's better to focus on adding darker colors around the lights to make them feel lighter in comparison, such as what I did with the flowers. And with the final touches in place, I can call this painting complete. I had a great time creating this artwork. While there are still definitely things I could critique about this piece, I have to remind myself that I am my own worst critic. It's important to step back and not compare myself to other artists all the time. My favorite artists often have years more experience than I do, which means I still have room to grow. I also have to remember that if I thought my paintings were perfect the first time, I'd never have any motivation to continue creating or improving. That said, I'm happy to get back to painting something that I actually enjoy, and I'm eager to see if I can get this into any upcoming galleries. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.